Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Hey, last one, Matchroom BOXXER 5v5. Matchroom BOXXER 5v5. Eddie.
Tell Frank Smith we're doing one.
Matchroom BOXXER 5v5.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, there were 5 fights that
Are we going to do it or not?
We'll make it.
Are we going to make it?
Are you going to lose though? You're going to lose, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
You're going to
You make Dalton small. Well, you're going to make these fights. Yeah, but you only shake the hand if you're going to actually make the fight.
We're going to do a Matchroom BOXXER 5v5 early next year.
We want to do though.
What fights do you want to do?
Dalton Smith against Adam Azim.
Next year, yeah.
What do you mean next year? Why can't we do it in December?
He's
fighting in October.
October the 19th.
Yeah. Okay, but you're going to do that fight after O'Hara.
Next year we'll do that
No,
fight.
no, you do that fight after O'Hara.
Next year we'll do that
Oh,
fight.
come on, Ben. Next year.
Who's Dalton fighting next then?
He's fighting Fernandez.
When is that?
In November, and then we'll go straight into that fight. Let's do, right, we'll shake on it now. Adam Azim, after he's fought O'Hara Davis, will stop ducking Dalton Smith and fight him next. Come on, son.
Do I agree around the purse bid situation is what he said? I think there's I don't think it was just to do with broadcasters. I think it was the wrong time for Fraser Clark. I think it was the wrong time for Adam Azim. Whether they were in the same...
Dubois, Beatrice Ferreira.
Do you know what you did with that one?
No.
Dubois was ordered against Rhiannon Dixon. That fight got made, by the way. That fight got made.
And then suddenly for Beatrice Ferreira.
And then suddenly you threw in Beatrice Ferreira.
Why not fight her?
What happened to Rhiannon?
She fought for a world title.
No, you moved her around and you got the
a world title.
Katie
And then
Taylor.
Beatrice got a world title as well. That's what we do. We manoeuvre. But Caroline could have fought Beatrice. Anyway, it's in the past.
She will fight Beatrice.
I hope she's a very good fighter.
Yeah, she will.
That's what grabbed my attention. So Eddie Hearn and Ben Shalom recently caught up with each other. Proposition of a Matchroom versus BOXXER 5-for-5 tournament. And the subject of Dubois versus Ferreira was brought up. Did Matchroom guide Rhiannon Dixon away from the Caroline Dubois fight? You could say that if you want to say that, but that would mean that BOXXER guided Caroline away from a Beatrice Ferreira fight. It's a two-way street. At the time that the order came down for Caroline and Rhiannon to face each other for the vacant IBF title, Rhiannon was already signed on to fight for the WBO title, the newly vacated WBO title. Though if you still wanted to fight for the IBF title, you could have fought Beatrice, the next highest ranked contender. The way it happened, the Caroline Dubois people chose to forego that fight to go the WBC route. Fight for an interim title instead of a full title. If Caroline Dubois is not a champion yet, or if she hasn't fought for a full alphabet title yet, well, that's why. I saw Caroline Dubois accuse Katie Taylor of holding the alphabet titles hostage at 135 while she reigns as undisputed champion at 140. That's not true. That's a deflection. That's bullshit. She vacated 2 of her alphabet titles and you could have fought for one of them, but that would have required you to fight Beatrice, and clearly you didn't want to do that. Ben didn't want you to do that. What they want Caroline to do is age Beatrice out, because Caroline is in her early 20s and Beatrice is in her early 30s. The question is, why didn't Caroline keep the energy for Beatrice that she keeps for Rhiannon? Rhiannon Dixon, a champion now, though going into the pros, a fighter with little more than just a few white-collar fights. Semi-pro. Not a member of Team GB. Not an Olympian like Caroline Dubois. You knew what you were doing, and why? Because when it came time to fight another Olympian, like yourself, with a similar amateur background to yours, you didn't want to do it. You'd rather fight for an interim title instead, and it says it all. So you can complain about Katie Taylor, say that you're targeting Katie Taylor? That's what Caroline has been saying, but Katie's a big fish, and you're not. You're not on her radar. Why would you be? I hope to see the fight between Beatrice and Caroline happen sooner than later, because that is a much more even fight and a more competitive fight than the Dixon fight would have been. Caroline didn't want a competitive fight. And I can't say that I respect that too much. Not really. You were looking for the low-hanging fruit, not privy to the leopard, the jaguar, hiding in the bush. Though, at some point, Rhiannon Dixon, now that she is WBO champion, if she stays champion after the upcoming Terry Harper fight, if she does, at some point she'll have to answer to Caroline, and at some point she'll have to answer to Beatrice. Because she's a champion now, and once you're a champion, once you've got a belt, that's a target on your back, one you're willfully wearing by pursuing an alphabet title. The training wheels come off.
Now that you've got a belt, they do.
And if as a defending champion you beat Terry Harper, a former champion, an established name, across several divisions, well, there ain't no excuses after that.
There won't be.
The proposition of a Matchroom versus BOXXER 5-for-5 tournament like the one we saw with Matchroom in Queensbury all hinges on their ability to make competitive fights. Emphasis on competitive fights. It's not necessarily Matchroom using their best.
They have to handicap themselves to do the tournament.
You saw Craig Spider Richards take on Willie Hutchinson last year, but is Craig Spider Richards their best guy at light heavyweight? Is that their best guy? No, Dimitri Bivol is their best guy. Of course, if you put Dimitri in there with Willie, well, that just ain't fair.
The control is making competitive fights. It's not necessarily your best guy versus my best guy.
Because in that situation, I think Matchroom's best guy would beat BOXXER's best guy.
Talk about Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith. Two unbeaten up-and-comers at the same weight, 140.
Another example of what I'm talking about. While Dalton Smith is promising, shows a ceiling, perhaps has a bright future, he's not Matchroom's best guy at 140. No, for their best guys, it'd have to be Jack Catterall, Regis Prograis, Subriel Matias. Now, any one of them versus Adam Azim, well, that just ain't fair.
Could always use Devin Haney as a ringer, though once again, if he did, well, that just ain't fair.
The goal of the tournament is to create even fights between the two promoters, and creating an even fight means that maybe Matchroom has to hold off on using their best fighters at a given weight.
It's gotta be even.
That's the focus. Even and competitive fights with fighters that are at the same level, same or similar.
So that's Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith. That's Sandy Ryan versus Lauren Price.
Because both Sandy and Lauren are champions at welterweight, though for it to get that far, Sandy's gotta beat Michaela, and unfortunately for Sandy, I don't think she's going to.
It's another story.
If Chris Billum Smith beats Zurdo Ramirez, then you can put BOXXER's Chris Billum Smith in the ring with Matchroom's Jai Opataya. Though, for it to get that far, Chris has got to beat Zurdo, and I don't think he's going to.
It's another story.
If they're serious about making it, aside from Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith, I wonder who else would participate in the tournament. So, Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith, Beatrice Ferreira versus Carolyn Dubois.
If Carolyn doesn't duck.
They have Florian Marcoux over there. Maybe they could do Conor Benn versus Florian Marcoux. Good tune-up fight for Conroy.
Curious what this tournament would look like and in what divisions would they do it.
Though it's clear, the tournament itself does not necessarily speak to the full breadth of the Matchroom stable. That it's not so much your best fighter versus my best fighter, but what fights we can make together that make for a competitive fight.
An even fight, because if Matchroom uses the full breadth of their stable, well, the BOXXER fighters, some of them, they might not stand a chance.
We'll see if they make it.
Challenges does Canelo pose once you guys get in there?
I don't know. I just think, his punching power and his physical size is the only thing that I really have to worry about. But who knows? Once we get in the ring, we don't know how I'll handle his punching power, his size. I've been fighting bigger guys my whole life, so I'm pretty familiar with.
For Terence to say that all he really has to worry about is Canelo Alvarez's size and punching power, I look at that as a gross oversight. It's an oversight because it discounts Canelo Alvarez's boxing acumen, his ring savvy, his ring IQ, his offense, his defense. If you hear people talk about him, you'd think he were just a brute, some bruiser.
A hard-punching brute.
That's how they talk about him. Canelo Alvarez is a fighter who's been a champion in 4 weight classes, unified in 1, undisputed in another, though overall he's actually campaigned in 5 or 6.
Not just 4. He's only been a champion in 4, but remember, Canelo started out somewhere down there at 140, 147.
He's been a professional boxer longer than Terence Crawford. You don't often hear it said that Canelo is literally a more experienced pro than Terence Crawford.
But he is.
To hear it said that all Terence has to worry about is Canelo Alvarez's size and punching power is tantamount to relegating him to being a brute, just a brute, when he's a bit more than that, to have campaigned in about 5 or 6 weight classes, having been a champion in 4, and through it all, he's never been dropped, he's never been stopped, never knocked out.
You gotta be pretty damn good to campaign in that many divisions and never get knocked out.
Never even getting knocked down. We all know, unofficially, Terence Crawford was knocked down. He was knocked down by Igis Kavaliauskas. All the ingredients were there. His glove and his knee touched the canvas. The referee ruled it a slip, but it looked a lot like it was off a punch. And when it landed, Terence did go down.
I'm not bashing Terence. I'm just saying that if a fighter as good as Terence Crawford can get knocked down, surely Canelo deserves some credit for never getting knocked down,
Let alone never getting knocked out. Across 5 or 6 divisions, having been a champion in 4 of them. And it's not because Canelo's such a big guy. He's not a big guy. He's practically eye level to Teofimo Lopez.
eye level to Terence.
With shorter arms, with a shorter wingspan. Terence Crawford's got more reach than Canelo Alvarez. So I reiterate, when you hear Terence say that all he really has to worry about is Canelo Alvarez's size and punching power, that's a gross oversight. I think Canelo is a fighter who is often typecast. You don't often hear people talk about Canelo's boxing brain in the same way they talk about Terence Crawford's boxing brain, or Naoya Inoue's boxing brain, Usyk's boxing brain.
He's way more disrespected than those fighters.
They disrespect him, and I want to make this clear that I am a huge fan of all 4 of those fighters. Canelo, Terence, Naoya, Usyk. I'm a big fan of all of them, but I do notice that they don't talk about Canelo's boxing acumen, his boxing brain, the same way they talk about theirs, even though he's had a more extensive boxing career than they have.
They disrespect him.
They'll tell you it's because he got a gift decision with Lara. Well, some people would tell you that Terence got a gift decision with Madrimov.
That Usyk got a gift in the Dubois fight that he should have been counted out, but the referee ruled it a low blow.
He knew he got a fractured orbital bone at the hands of a Nonito Donaire that was in his late 30s. In a fight that going in, he knew he was heavily favored to win. He got a lot more than he bargained for. The point I'm making is that nobody's perfect, Canelo included, yet you judge him a lot more harsh than you judge them.
Why?
You guys know me. I ain't got no hair on my tongue, and I'm too goddamn old to beat around the bush. I think the reason
They typecast him?
they disrespect him is because they don't like the idea of a Mexican fighter breaking the stereotype. They like to think of the Mexican fighter as being a bruiser, tantamount to just a brawler.
Not a boxer.
What I consider a remnant of the Mayweather era, as in no other era before it did I see so many Mexican boxers disrespected by the boxing fans. But it was in the Mayweather era where this anti-Mexican attitude started, as if Mexican fighters are just opponents. They're just opponents for Americans.
Did you forget about Salvador Sanchez?
Did you?
Did you forget about Julio Cesar Chavez?
Did you forget about what he did to Roger Mayweather? Did you forget about what he did to Meldrick Taylor? He had the man pissing blood.
They must have forgot.
So when I see Canelo Alvarez typecasted in this era, it's due to the previous one. It's because in the Mayweather era, there was this growing sentiment that all Mexican fighters are just flat-footed plotters.
They're not slick like Floyd. They're not slick like the Americans.
It's nauseating, and this attitude that people have towards Canelo, I think, stems from that era. That's where it started, because I've been watching boxing a long time, and I never really saw fans disrespecting Mexican fighters before. That started in the Mayweather era.
What the hell was he doing wearing a mariachi suit with Mexican colors anyway?
They say it's an homage to his uncle, the one that Chavez beat the hell out of. That uncle? I think that Canelo's ring craft and nuances as a fighter are lost on them because they like to think of all Mexican fighters as being a certain way. They don't appreciate his finer qualities and his unique attributes.
Not every Mexican fighter is anywhere near as good as Canelo. Kinda like how not every American fighter is anywhere near as good as Floyd or Terence.
They typecast him. They don't think of Canelo as being crafty, though what you often see from Canelo Alvarez, who's usually the shorter, stumpier fighter with the shorter arms in the ring, is educated pressure.
He doesn't have the height and length to box on the outside because oftentimes these guys are a lot taller and longer than he is. He's got the ring savvy to know he's got to get close to them. The closer he is, the better off.
Though he's not stumbling over his feet and trying for punches before he's in position to land them like some other fighters, like a Teofimo Lopez.
He's not trying for stupid punches, lunging and leaping. He's accurate with his output. Efficient.
More than he's given credit for, Terence says that all he has to worry about is Canelo Alvarez's size and punching power. Even if I relegated Canelo to just being a physical fighter, well, Terence, you got hit with quite a few right hands from Israel Madrimov. He had a lot of success with that punch, and that was at 154. So if Canelo hits you with a right at 168,
what happens?
You saw Edgar Berlanga absorb a crisp, clean left hook that sent him to the canvas. And he was able to get up, he was able to survive it. I think it helps that he's a lot bigger than Canelo Alvarez and weighed in somewhere in between 185 to 193.
Now, do you think Terence could absorb a clean left hook like that and get up? You think he could absorb a hook like that and not get knocked out?
It's a question. It's just a question. I'm a fan of Terence. I have been for years. And I'm not underselling Terence. You're underselling Canelo.
You're underestimating him.
Do you not think he's improved from the time that he received that boxing lesson from Floyd Mayweather? Do you think he's the same fighter now that he was way back there in 2014? Because if you do, you don't know shit about boxing.
Nothing.
But that's how they think of him. They think of him as being the Canelo Alvarez from 10 years ago, the kid who was 23 years old, in the ring with the #1 pound-for-pound fighter at the time.
Let me fill you in.
I think Terence Crawford
is special.
Could become an undisputed champion at 154 because I think he's that good. I think he can do it 3 times at 154. But at 168 with Canelo, he gets knocked out.
I don't want to hear your tribalist bullshit.
Your slick bullshit about slick fighters from America. You say that Canelo hasn't knocked somebody out in a while. Do you think it's because he regularly fights bigger, younger fighters than he is? Bigger, much bigger fighters than Terence is.
Do you think that might have something to do with it? Terence isn't bigger or younger than those fighters. He isn't bigger or younger than Canelo.
So if Canelo gets through with a right hand or right hands, like Madrimov got through with right hands, or if Canelo hits Terence with a left hook, like he hit Edgar with a left hook, yeah, I don't think Terence is going to be able to absorb it. Not as easily as they did, because they're bigger and younger.
It's not a knock on Terence.
But I've seen what I need to see. And if they actually make that fight, Canelo wins that fight. Canelo stops Terence Crawford.